Guys, welcome back. It is Racer X, and today I want to talk a little bit about the Scat Pack. Yes, there is our 2019 Scat Pack Challenger with the shaker package on it. And you know what? I get a lot of questions about, is the Scat Pack faster than this car, or is it slower than this car? And you know what? So I decided I wanted to make a little video today about the cars that I feel like the Scat Pack is faster than, and the cars that I feel like still can beat the Scat Pack. And I'm trying to find stuff that's a pretty good matchup. It's good competition. Obviously, I'm not trying to match it up against a Porsche 918. I'm not trying to match it up against a 6-cylinder Charger either. So something that's a legitimate matchup for this car. Should be a fun little video, and hopefully you guys enjoy that. Also, if you are new to the channel, make sure you hit the subscribe button down there on the bottom. Here we go. We got the 1,000 horsepower helmet. God. Okay, guys, first thing I want to do is talk a little bit, of course, about the Challenger Scatpack. This particular car, for a naturally aspirated car, is pretty robust. It's very torquey, and the car comes in right about 4,250 pounds, which is probably heavier than most of the other cars I'm going to talk about today. But that torque on that Hemi, you know what, that makes up for a lot. So the matchups we're talking about today should be a lot of fun. 485 horsepower, 475 foot-pounds of torque from the factory, and the car is an absolute blast to drive, especially in track mode, how I like to drive it. So let's go ahead and see how it stacks up against the other cars in this little competition, this little comparison, and you guys tell me if you agree. I do also want to make quick mention that just to compare apples to apples, all the cars we're talking about today are going to be automatic transmission. Hopefully most of these should be a pretty fair matchup for the Scat Pack. And I'll talk a little bit about eighth mile, quarter mile, stuff like that, and maybe even roll racing a little bit. But I just want to make sure that everybody understands we're talking about automatic transmission and the newest car that's out. So we'll talk about basically the statistics from like 2019 and 2020. Well, guys, there's our first competitor right there. As you probably expected, it is the 2020 Mustang GT. And as we know, these things can really be fast when they're modified. You probably just saw David Van Boris break the Coyote Mustang stock block record at 826, which is just flat stupid. These cars are actually a lot lighter than a Scat Pack. You're looking at basically 3,700 pounds. 460 horsepower, 420 pound-feet of torque on this car. But like I said, there is a weight difference here. And another big thing with this car is it is a 10-speed transmission. So you may have remembered when I ran the 10-speed, the 2019 at the track. I actually want to show you that video. Okay, guys, 2019 Mustang GT we're racing now. Should be fun. A super close race. Super close. I don't even know who won. So we had identical trees, which we could not have asked for a better race, guys. And at the end, it was a .005 margin of victory, which I can't even tell you how small a victory that was, but we didn't know who won at the end. Fantastic race. Man, and as you can see, it was super close in the 8th mile. He had me by several miles an hour in the 8th, and he would have gone on to actually, I think, slaughter me on the top end if it was quarter mile. But as it was, I got him in the 8th, just barely, by the skin of my teeth. And but as we know, these Mustangs can be really fast, and they're actually a really good deal. For about $35K, you can pick yourself up a fairly nicely equipped Mustang GT. And the premiums will go up there in the mid-40s. But guys, it's a lot of car for the money, this Mustang GT. They are a lot of fun to drive. Got different drive modes, things like that on them. And I'll kind of walk around the car just a little bit so you guys can see it a little bit better. But man, these things are actually a blast. I mean, these things will actually run like 100 and I think they're running like 11.8. I saw 1181 and like 119 miles an hour. So guys, comparing this to the Scat Pack, if you're going to run the 8th, it's basically going to be a driver's race. The Scat Pack torque will get you out of the hole and will give you a slight advantage out of the hole, but that Mustang will catch you right about the 8th mile. And on the quarter mile, guys, it's probably going to go by you. If you own a Scat Pack, you're going to race this thing in the quarter mile, you come off even, chances are the Mustang is going to get you. But you know what? It's still a really fun comparison. Both cars are fantastic. And here we go. On to the next one. All right, guys, here's the next one in our lineup. There it is. It's the C7 Corvette, the Stingray. I absolutely love this car. Thing is a blast. It's 455 horsepower, 460 pound-feet of torque. And you know what? The car is a beast, a lot of fun to drive. It seems like it would be an even matchup for the Scat Pack. It's down 30 horsepower compared to the Scat Pack, but here is the killer. The car weighs about 3,500 pounds, depending on the trim. As we know, the Scat Pack is significantly heavier, about 750 pounds, and that is the difference because the C7 Corvette can run, it's 11.7, something like that, at about 119 mile an hour. So the Corvette is definitely pulling away on the big end of the track. In the 8th mile, I still give the Corvette perhaps a slight advantage. Obviously, the Scat Pack's going to have the torque coming out of the hole, but you also got this thing being so light. So it should be a pretty fun race in the 8th mile. In the quarter mile, I don't give the Scat Pack much of a chance stock for stock. The C7 is truly a beast, guys. You're talking about a car that costs anywhere really between $60,000 and $75,000 from a sticker perspective, depending upon what trim level you get. But an absolutely fantastic ride, more expensive than the Scat Pack. In the 8th mile, like I said, I think it's more of a driver's race, but I do still give this the edge just slightly. And in the quarter mile, guys, it's got way more mile an hour, so the C7 is going to win every time. So on to the next one. Well, there's the next one in the lineup, guys. It is the 2020 Camaro SS. Same essential motor in this car that you find in the C7 Corvette. It is that aluminum V8. Thing puts out some power, 455 horsepower, 455 torque. And guys, the car's right about 3,700 pounds, maybe just a shade over, right about the same weight as the Mustang. And what makes this car quick, guys, it's got that 10-speed transmission in it, just like the Mustang does. It's about the same weight as the Mustang. So once again, we're looking at a big weight disadvantage for the Challenger. However, guys, remember the Challenger has more torque, and you may remember a really, really cool race that Mrs. X had with a 2018 Camaro SS that had the 8-speed in it. It was unbelievably close. Actually, I'd like to show that to you. Okay, guys, check it out. 2018 Camaro SS, automatic. 2019 Scat Pack Challenger Shaker, also an automatic in Mrs. X. Should be fun. So there you go, guys. It's in the 8th mile. I think that it's really a driver's race. I really do. They say that this car will run somewhere around 11.9 at 115. On the top end, I do think the Camaro has a slight advantage. It may not be quite as much as the Mustang, but it's going to be pretty close. So if you're in a Scat Pack at the track, you're probably going to have to tree one of these. And if you're doing a roll race somewhere around 70, I think you'll be okay. But once you really hit the high speeds, the 10-speed comes into its own on the Camaro SS, and it does kind of start to pull away from the Scat Pack. So that's my assessment, guys. It pretty much is a driver's race in the 8th. The quarter, maybe a slight advantage here. And in a roll race, once you get up there in the high triple digits, this thing should pull away because of the one is the weight, it's the aero, and then of course the 10-speed transmission, guys. So on to the next one. So another car that I thought would be a little bit of fun to compare the Scat Pack to is actually a car that's kind of in a completely different segment. It's the Porsche 911 Carrera S. Now, I know what you're thinking. Yeah, that's a traditional, true sports car. The Scat Pack's a muscle car. Completely different segment. Yes, those things start at $115,000, but when you look at it from a pure horsepower perspective, things change a little bit, because basically what you've got is you've got a car that makes 443 horsepower and 390 pound-feet of torque. And so when you compare it that way, the Scat Pack is far superior. You're looking at about 40 horsepower and what, like 80 pound-feet of torque. I mean, it's a big difference, but also, you know, here are a couple things the Porsche has working for it. Obviously, it's expensive for a reason. You've got a lot of German engineering that goes into those cars, and truth be told, guys, those Porsches are actually quite nasty. So they actually punch well above their weight when you talk about it from a horsepower perspective, because here's the deal. Those things will actually run like 11.3 at 125 miles an hour. So if you are in a Scat Pack, please do not go pick on a Porsche 911. They're actually pretty dang fast. So the horsepower numbers kind of lie a little bit. They are underrated. You're talking about a 6-cylinder turbo motor, and my understanding is those things make pretty close to what they're rated actually at the wheel. So those Porsches are actually really quick. They're fantastic looking cars. They're fun to drive. But like I said, you're going to pay at least 115 grand for one and up, depending upon what options you choose. So my assessment, obviously, compared to the Scat Pack, obviously from a cost perspective, the Scat Pack all day. And then of course, but if you're going to run one in the 8th, chances are it's probably going to get you. In the quarter, it's going to be walking by you quite handily. 125 mile an hour is almost Hellcat territory when it comes to mile an hour on the big end. So anyway, I thought it was fun because the horsepower is there, but obviously with the advanced transmission and some of the other things the Porsche has working for it, you know, it's kind of night and day in terms of performance there. So anyway, on to the next one. All right, guys, next up on the comparison list, the 2020 brand new Toyota Supra. Now, funny little car here. So this thing actually has a 3-liter twin-turbo V6. It's actually rated at like 335 horsepower. It's like 360 torque. But here's the thing. This thing actually makes to the rear wheel what it says it makes to the flywheel. So it's very underrated. And you know what, guys? This thing comes in at under 3,400 pounds. So initially on paper, you would think this would not be a matchup for the Scat Pack. But in fact, I think we'll find that it is actually quite a good matchup for the Scat Pack. Now, here's the thing. They say it runs like a 12.3 at 113 mile an hour. Well, the Scat Pack, as we know, maybe about 11.9, 12.0 at the same mile an hour. So what that tells me is this car is coming on pretty strong on the top end of the track. However, this is one car I actually think the Scat Pack has an advantage on. There's a huge power advantage for the Scat Pack, although it is much heavier, but the torque is right there. And I will say this car is actually quite torquey. They say it makes like 380 foot-pounds or pound-feet of torque actually to the tire, and it's not even rated at that. So it's pretty impressive in terms of, you know, what this little car actually does. It's a light little car, fun to drive, 8-speed transmission. I still think the Scat Pack gets the win against the new Toyota Supra, of course, unless they're modified. And then, of course, as we know, some of these turbo cars get to be monsters when they're modified. So anyway, I give the edge to the Scat Pack on this one. On to the next. Little Supra action right there. Another car that I want to make quick mention of is the BMW M4. I think it's actually a pretty fun comparison to the Scat Pack. Now, it is a more expensive car. We're looking at a car that costs anywhere basically from like 70 to the mid 80s, depending on the spec. And they've actually got some actually high-end specs that go into the 6 figures on that. But I want to talk about the regular base model M4. They're rated at like 425 horse. It's like 406 pound-feet of torque. But here's the thing, that car is also very underrated. From the factory, we're looking at a car that weighs maybe just a shade over 3,600 pounds. And you know what? It's got a pretty aggressive 7-speed transmission in it. So they say, I've kind of found a bunch of different quarter-mile times on that car. Anything from really kind of 11.6 to 12.0. But I've seen these things in person. So what I will tell you is that the M4 is really fast on the highway. It's a 3-liter twin-turbo inline-6, and very sharp car. They're fantastic handling cars, and you know, I am a fan of the M4. I will say, when you compare it to the Scat Pack, obviously price-wise, it loses. When you talk about 8th mile, I really do believe it's more of a driver's race, and this is another car, being that it's a turbo car on the top end. In a quarter mile, I think the car is got the advantage over the Scat Pack, both from an aero perspective, not necessarily from a power perspective, but they do make pretty good power, pretty close to the Scat Packs, at least what I have seen. Now, I will say this: if you're trying to roll race an M4, it's probably going to get you. The M4s on the highway, I have seen it in person. They are very, very quick. So if you have a Scat Pack, I would recommend, if you're going to run an M4, that you do it in the 8th mile, where you can hold the advantage with your torque. So anyway, guys, that's my assessment of the M4. We're off to another one. Okay, guys, now for the last car that I want to compare the Scat Pack to, this beast right here. That is the Cadillac ATS-V. And I tell you what, I actually really, really like the look of this car. It's actually got a 6-cylinder versus like the CTS-V, which has got the 8-cylinder motor, but you do get a 6-cylinder twin turbo. That's good for 464 horsepower and like 445 pound-feet of torque. And we're right about 3,800 pounds on this car here, guys. So believe it or not, they say this car can cover the quarter mile in like 12.1. So what that tells me is that this particular vehicle actually is a perfect matchup for the Scat Pack. And so really it is a driver's race with the ATS-V, 8-speed transmission in this car, and fantastic looking, great interior on this thing. And I think you can start somewhere in the 70 grand range on these for new, and they can reach all the way up into like the mid 80s. For a higher trim level. But the ATS-V, absolutely fantastic looking car. You run into one in your Scat Pack, it is a driver's race. Do not let them tree you. They will most likely beat you. And of course, as we know, with the turbo cars, downpipes and a tune, these things really, really wake up. I've seen some of these that are really, really quick. But I love the comparison to the ATS-V. They're neck and neck as far as I'm concerned. The Scat Pack may have a ever slight advantage on the 8th mile, but it really, really is very, very close, almost too close to call. So hopefully you guys enjoyed the review. Well, guys, that's it. I hope you liked the review of the Scat Pack Challenger versus all the other competition out there. And you know what? You guys may have completely different opinions based on either just numbers you've seen or races you've seen, whatever else might be. But feel free to drop your comments and questions down there on the bottom. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. Until next time, Racer X.